Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk on the double Sedra, the concluding Sedras of the book of Bamidbar. And we will say Chazak, Chazak, Venice Chazak, the mantra that we should be strong, and strengthen ourselves as we complete the fourth book of the Torah. And really, when we have finished this book, this is the section of the Torah that has been Hashem's commandments to the children of Israel as expressed through the actual mitzvahs, as expressed through the events that happen to us during this period of time. And then in the book of Devarim, we're going to hear Moshe Rabbeinu's final address to the people, summarizing. It's also called Mishneh Torah, the book of Devarim, which means the repetition of the Torah, because it summarizes the mitzvahs and gives Moshe Rabbeinu's words of encouragement to his people as they stand on the threshold of entering into the promised land, which he will view from afar but not be able to enter. So really, this is the conclusion of this first part of the Torah. And when we say Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek, I think that the words have a particular resonance because the Sedras of Matos and Masei almost always read together, but they are also read either on Rosh Chodesh, Menachem Av, on Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month of Av, or as in the case this year, we are going to say the prayer for the blessing of the new month of Av, which is Rosh Chodesh Av this year, is on Wednesday. And so we are approaching the final period of mourning of the 3 weeks with the ushering in of the 9 days. And this is a period of intense mourning. This is a period of remembering the destruction of 2 temples, of so many communities, so many lives that seem to swirl around this time period. And nothing is random, nothing is coincidence. So the words that we read in the Torah are there for us as encouragement, as a learning curve to think what has happened and how can we prevent it? How can we remedy? What tikkun, what repair can we effect? And as always, when we're looking at the themes and the words of these sedras, and when we read them together, it is an opportunity to see it from a different perspective. And so, what is in this situation? How can we get the encouragement that we need? How can we really use this as a learning tool? And I thought of it in terms of we're going on a very major journey, and this is the translation of the word Masei with the second of the Sedras. And what is the packing list for that journey? When you're going away, and you may have a weight allowance, you may have pieces of luggage allowance, and so you need to be very careful to make sure that you pack the essential things that you have so that when you need them, you've got them. And this is the case, I think, that when we look at these 2 Sedras, we have to really concentrate on what we would like to pack to take with us for this journey. And I think that the opening section in the Sedra of Matos is a good place to start, and that deals with the laws of vows. And we'll just have a look at that section. And that is chapter 30, verses 2 to 17. So we have 15 verses dealing with the intricacies of the laws regarding vows. This is the beginning of the address to the heads of the tribes. And I think that the first thing that we pack in our journey through life, this is going to be represented by the journeys that we'll read about in the second Sedra. But the first thing that we pack is this message that we have to be so very careful with our words. With words, you can change the status of something. If it's something that is completely permissible, if we make a vow that we are going to abstain from it, it becomes prohibited to us. And this concept of being very careful with words is not something that is new to us when we know about the laws of Lashon Hara, the laws that prohibit the any negative, any any derogatory statement made about another person, unless it falls within the exceptions when certain things need to be discussed. For example, as if there is a shidduch, a marriage suggestion being proposed, and somebody knows something that may be negative and would not be allowed to be said in another circumstance. But in the case of making sure that somebody who is entering possibly into marriage would know this information, or a business arrangement, again, information that should be sensitively shared if there is such circumstances. Otherwise, there is nothing derogatory about another person that should be said. So we're used to this this care when it comes to what comes out of our mouths, just like we're particular with kashrus, with the laws of kosher, what goes into our mouths, we have to be at least as careful as what comes out of our mouths. And so by opening these twin sedras with that section, we are seeing in another context how we have to be so very careful with our words. The first thing that we put in our suitcase for the journey. And it struck me as particularly vital to internalize this lesson when I was reading some of the news regarding certain sections of society that think that they are allowed to incite violence, they're allowed to speak in the most terrible way, and as long as you agree with them, you're okay, and if you don't, then you're not. So sort of just quoting from a London Trans Pride spokesman, when one of their members was inciting violence, that anybody who disagreed with them should be punched in the face. So this spokesman said, while they didn't condone violence, Sarah, I quote now, Sarah and many others in our community hold a lot of rage and anger, and they have the right to express that anger through their words. So I think what we have here is the very opposite of the ideal scenario. A person may well have justified rage and anger, but there is never a right to express that in words that are going to inflame situations, that are going to incite to violence, that are going to be derogatory about another person. Yes, you may have valid, justified concerns, but those need to be very carefully expressed and mindful about not making a situation worse. And I feel that so much of what we see of meltdown of society across the world comes from this kind of attitude that I have the right to say and do exactly as I like, so long as I belong to a certain section of society. Otherwise, that right is obviously taken away. And this is why it's become even more crucial to pack in our suitcase this great care, this precision of the words that we use, and trying as far as we can to think about the possible effect that these words are going to have, and to really measure them before we speak. And we've observed before that before I say something, I think, and my thoughts are not transparent. Hashem has created us that we don't have to say everything that we think. And this, I believe, is something for us to internalize, that we have this filter, we have this opportunity and obligation to really think so carefully before we speak. And combining the earlier reference to the time of year that we find ourselves, the 9 days, the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, and how this was brought about through Sinas Finam. And this is often viewed through the prism of words that were said that caused great harm and distress, and that caused that were a significant part of the reason for the destruction of the temples. And so, thinking about that, this is, I believe, from these two sedras, our first item that we pack. The second item to go into that suitcase that we get from these two cedras is this idea that has really percolated through the whole of the book of Bamidbar, and that's the idea of community, unity, and individual. And the book of Bamidbar starts with the arrangement of the tribes around the camp, around the Mishkan, and the importance of this encampment. And what we have in the early Cedras is this vision of the central focus being the Mishkan, but everybody has their particular place and they are part of that one whole. And that is a really important sense of identity, of belonging to a nation. And then we move on from that we have this the individual as well. As we look through the Cedras of the book of Bamidbar, we have Shalach Lacha, we have the individuals, we have the Meraglim who speak and they are representing their case. We have Korach, again, an individual using his words. And Chukas, we see the words that were used, the Moshe Rabbeinu does not actually speak to the rock, as the irony is that that's the absence of words in this case. And we have Balak, again, this event where we have the prophet Bilam trying to find the words to curse Bnei Israel, individuals speaking, doing, and very much looking at these individuals and how their lives pan out. But and then we have the individual Pinchas, who is standing in the vanguard, who is fighting back this tide of immorality as an individual. So we understand that as a community, as one nation, we will never lose sight of the importance of the individual. And looking at certain previous ideologies and periods of history where the nation has swallowed up the individual. The individual is supposed to just lose him or herself into that communal identity. And the Torah has always straddled these two worlds, has always focused on the unique contribution of each and every individual that has been created, yet also seeing the importance of being part of the larger unit. And I think that we see this actually manifesting in the efforts that in Israel, in the IDF, that the army go through to make sure that every soldier is brought back. And this is something that is a theme that I believe comes from what we see in the book of Bamidbar, as these two concepts are intertwined, so that we don't ever lose one at the expense of the other. But it's very interesting to actually look at the word matos. We start in the Cedra of Matos that begins with the personal, the laws of personal vows. But this word, Vayedaber Moshe el Roshe Hamatos, and Moshe spoke to the Livnei Yisrael, the children of Israel's tribal heads. So this is an unusual word that only appears in the book of Bamidbar. In the rest of the Torah, we are more familiar with the word shevet to refer to the tribal group. And one of the explanations to contrast the two, to see what the difference is between these two words, is that a shevet can be translated as a club, or also a cudgel. And club as in a group, and a cudgel as in a blunt instrument that can be used to hit people. And the word mater, again, means a group of, can be a gathering of people, but it's a staff, as in the stick that's used for support. So when we're using the word mater, we are talking about this group of people that is supposed to be supporting one another. It's not being used as a weapon. It's being used as something to give support. And this is the support that we get when we belong to a particular, a closer knit group where we may have more connection with the individuals in that group. When it's a much larger group, then it's difficult to have that sense of connection. And so that is the argument in favor of the tribal identity. But it is only something that is beneficial when there isn't the intertribal strife and the and we can see throughout our history that sometimes the tribes were a source of infighting and disunity. And while it's important to be able to have a sense of belonging and not to get lost in something that is a very large organization, but equally it's something that needs to be managed very carefully. And so the use of the word mater is something that is getting us to really see that we need to understand that although we belong to a smaller group of a tribe, but we need to also have this sense of belonging to the greater whole as well. And there is, we mentioned the daughters of Zelophehad. They come up here as well. They were discussed in Pinchas when they come before Moshe Rabbeinu to ask for a ruling regarding their ability to inherit in the land of Israel. And then in the Sedra of Masei, we see that they are that the members of the tribe come and they say that we are the tribe of Manasseh, that if the daughters of Zelophehad are going to marry out of the tribe of Manasseh, then the land that should really belong to the tribe of Manasseh is going to go out of that tribe. And so there is a ruling given that the daughters of Zelophehad must marry within the tribe of Manasseh. They're free to marry whoever they like, but they must make sure that they marry within the tribe of Manasseh. And so this actually was a cause of great distress, that there was this limitation and requirement to only marry within the particular tribe. And the day of Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, that we actually celebrate 6 days after the 9th of Av, is a cause of great celebration for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons is that the ban on intertribal marriage was actually lifted. So we see that the tribal groupings, the whole idea of the desert encampment, on the one hand, they are underscoring the need of understanding that we belong to a nation, that we have our special identity as one of the tribes in that nation, but we equally keep our own individual capacity and potential and identity as well. And I think that balance and that way of thinking and living is the second very important item to be packed on our journey. And the third item is that we are understanding that our lives are a journey. And when we look at the Sedra of Masei, we will see that we've got in very precise detail. It is a travelogue. We need to pack our travel plan. And this travel plan will, if you're going on a journey, then that is going to be your plan for the future. Our travel plan actually looks back to the past, looks back to the events that are in the Torah. And if we look, and I'm going to just show you from the Gutnik Chumash, which is the Lubavitch Chumash, and it's got these very interesting maps which map out. Here we have journeys 1 to 12, which took 6 weeks. Then we have journeys 13 to 15, which took 5 weeks. Journeys 16 to 33, which took 38 years. This is after the sin of the Meraglim. And then journeys 34 to 42. And you can see that we can draw precise maps from the information that we are given in the Torah in this Sedra, that we have such precision. And we might say, well, how can that be something that is perpetually relevant? That happened then. I'm not in the Sinai Desert, so why are these maps relevant for me? And so there are a number of explanations given, I believe, stemming from the knowledge that everything in the Torah is of perpetual relevance. And the more something doesn't look like it's of perpetual relevance, the more we have to understand that we need to make the effort to discover its perpetual relevance because it is not obvious. And starting with Rashi, who so often is the starting point of our inquiries and our understanding, Rashi understands that these journeys are actually an indication of Hashem's kindness, because if you work out in 38 years, that people actually, out of those 42 journeys, they traveled 20 times, they traveled to 20 destinations. So actually, it was not a very onerous traveling situation. If when you break it down and see that a certain number of journeys were made in the first year, a certain number of journeys in the last year. So in that middle larger section of 38 years, they are not moving around. The people, the children of Israel, are not moving around so much. So the first explanation is that it is a way for us to internalize Hashem's kindness to the people, his consideration that even though they had this detour because of the report of the Meraglim and the people's reaction to that report, that was done with Hashem's kindness to make it as soft as possible, that this particular challenge. And then there's another explanation that's given towards the end of the Rashi. Rabbi Tanchuma Doroshbo Dorosha Acheres. Rabbi Tanchuma expounded it in a different manner. Mashal Melech, this can be compared to a king. Shehaya beno chole, whose son was ill. V'holicho lamakom rachok, and he took him to a distant place. L'raposo, to cure him. Kevan shahayu chosrin, once they started back, Hischil oviv mone kol hamasois, his father began to count all the journeys. Omalo, he said to his son, Kan yoshanu, here we slept. Kan chukarnu, here we felt cold. Kan chashashta asroshcha v'chulhu, here you had a headache, etc. So this second explanation takes a completely different perspective and says that it is the retelling of a father who has had to travel to a distant place to find a cure for his ill son. And as they're returning, he remembers every single stage, every aspect of the journey, and he appreciates every stage that was part of the healing process for his son. And these journeys, these 42 journeys, which on the one hand can be precisely shown on a map of the Sinai Desert in the particular time period of the book of Bamidbar, but these 42 journeys can also be part of our own lives. Each of our own lives has its own particular stage, each challenge, stage, something that we have to go through. And this is part of our journey to the promised land. We are all on this journey to the promised land. And so when we think that they are not, it is not just a travel plan, but it is a message for the involvement of Hashem in our lives and the way that every single aspect of our life is a part of a journey that is leading to somewhere bigger, somewhere greater, and is part of a particular healing process for us as we come through it, just like the Bnei Yisrael had to. And at the time of challenge, it is something that is very hard to endure, and nobody can ever pretend otherwise. But just to have that message of hope and connection to Hashem, and that sense of the beloved relationship between us and Hashem, that can be our best coping mechanism as we encounter all of these challenges, and feel empathy with the Bnei Yisrael at the time of their wanderings in the desert. And really, in doing all of that, we are coming closer to achieving the right perspective on how to view events in our lives. And may we all be able to internalize the words of the Torah, the events in our history, and the events in our own personal present lives, and see it as part of a greater whole. And in joining with that, we are best able to overcome and grow from everything that is part of our lives. Thank you very much for listening, and wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov.